This one is the Consumer Price Index, which shows some of the same information, but this one goes back to 1800. And as you'll see at the top, 1967 is pegged at being 100, or the relative price at 100 of items. And so you can see from about 1800 to 1910, we had a couple dips. We were at 51 in 1800, and these are estimated, because they didn't have the same way of tracking everything that they knew now. But we went from 51 down to 30, but then from 1840 through to 1910, we were pretty consistent. Now there were some ups and downs in between there. This is obviously out at a 20-year view of everything, so there were some ups and downs in there, but we stayed at a pretty level mark. Then we had 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve, and all of a sudden we pop back up to 60, and we go down, and then on up the end of the tail. It looks almost like that global warming graph with the hockey stick sort of thing at the end. We had this exponential growth, and this got so bad that actually current terms, or at least the last time I looked at the current ones, they actually have it pegged back, rather than 1967, 100 is pegged back in 1980s, so that it didn't look quite as bad as it does here, going from 110 in 1970 up to 639, being that relative comparison in the price of goods. So it's become, according to this, it's become much more expensive for us to buy commodidies and the things we buy in our daily lives. But there are many things that this doesn't even take into account. So just an overview of the Consumer Price Index there. Let's go to the next. And this is the reported GDP in billions of dollars. We see, and we only have this one going back to 1930. But here we are, and the GDP shows the velocity of money in the economy, or the number of dollars that exchanged hands. And so with the basic thought being that if we've got more money exchanging hands, the better it is for the economy, especially for the government, because most times dollars exchange hands, it's a taxable event. So they like that. And we're going to talk about that more a little bit later. But here we have in 1930, $97.4 billion worth of volume in the economy, and just kind of rises up steadily to 1970, then from 1960 to 1970 it doubles, 1950 to 1960 it doubles, and back to 1940 we've doubled almost every 10 years, except for from 2000 to 2008, but we haven't quite doubled yet. We'll see what happens with inflation hitting, with all the spending that's been going on and increasing the money supply over the last year and a half. Anyway, we've got this huge curve. I mean, and people look at it and just say, wow, look at that, $14.5 trillion of exchanges going on in the economy. That's fantastic. Look at all the wealth that's been created and all this awesome progress that we've made. If we adjust these numbers for inflation, whoa, wait a second. You mean we've really only done about 14 trillion changes to $725 billion worth of exchanges? We've had some growth in the economy, obviously. But inflation is this bandit that comes in the night, and although we feel richer because we have more dollars in our pockets, that we slowly have our wealth eroded. And later we're going to have some quotes from a couple high-powered economists that all agree on basically the same thing, and they're from all different sides of the field. But anyway, so there we have this curve that if we had a currency that was not being inflated, we would still have seen growth, because I mean there's naturally things that are growing the economy. I mean there's just that productive nature of Americans that will grow the economy. There'll be more opportunities to exchange, but those dollars still don't exchange as much. Government doesn't like that because that's less taxable events for them to deal with, And as well, if they're held and restricted to the amount of money they can pump back into the system, then because of a gold standard or a gold and silver mixed standard, then it's a lot harder for them to usurp power, and they can't make their constituency feel as warm and fuzzy by giving them all sorts of entitlements, and it makes it more difficult for them. Well, I think we have things maybe a little too easy right now. So how do we see the effects on inflation? Well, let's see. If we go back again to 1913, an average home price was about $3,500. And I talked with my grandma a little while ago, and they bought their first house not in 1913. It was a little after that. It cost them about $5,000. It was around the Bay Area in California. And my grandpa was a laborer, worked for, he was a teamster, he drove truck, and they had that house, working as a laborer, they had that house paid off, free and clear, in a matter of about 2 years. Now, if we adjust for inflation, directly for inflation, obviously we've seen a little bit more growth in the real estate market than matches our base inflation line. But that price probably would have gone up to something like $80,000 to $90,000. So we've seen almost a doubling of that because of our wonderful real estate credit bubble that we've had. If it took them 2 years, working as a laborer to pay off that house, then shouldn't, even adjusted for inflation, shouldn't I to work at my inflation-adjusted job and be able to pay for my house in about 2 years? The difference is that then, because the dollar has inflated so much, there's also a tremendous amount of interest that's tied to that money, whereas back in 1913 with a $3,500 home, my interest amount, was relatively small. It was something I could conquer much quicker. But when you make that number larger, the interest rate compounds on that. So I'm barely able to pay off the amount of interest that accrues on that mortgage on my home in the month, much less pay down any of the principal. And so we've gotten to a point where people are indebted on their house for up to 40 years. And there's talk that I've heard, I don't know that this has gone into place at this point in time, but up to 50 years. A 50-year home mortgage had been considered at one time. But like I said, I don't know if that actually came to pass, but there are 40-year mortgages. Whereas about a century ago, you could get it paid off in 2 as a laborer, not highly skilled, high school education or less. Interesting. Gallon of gas, 12 cents in 1913, $2.69 today. Pegs right on the inflation amount. It's still 12 cents a gallon. But, because of inflation, it's $2.69, and we go to the pump and we gripe, but that's the inflation. Now, here you'll see a gold. This is actually a current release of a gold double eagle, which is a $20 coin. In 1913, that was $20. You would have this gold coin, take it in, and spend it for $20. It's about an ounce of gold. See that today, that which is about an ounce of gold is worth about $1,000. And if you go through and look at commodities that you could buy back then and today for that $20 back then or $1,000 today, you'll find that almost across the board they will be within just, it'll cost you about $1,000 for what you could have bought back in 1913 for $20. And so using gold and or silver as a benchmark, it allows you to see in reality what is actually happening to inflation. You don't have to go through the the equations to try and figure out the consumer price index, because the consumer price index gets manipulated based on the political powers that be, for their own ends.